Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Tanvi Mittal. Tanvi is an AI systems and quality engineering expert focused on testing, reliability, and security challenges in LLM powered applications and AI software systems. Tanvi, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thank you for having me here today.
My pleasure. Before we get into our topics, can you give a quick intro about yourself and what you do to our audience?
So I'm Tanvi Mittal. I work at one of the finance bank and I have 15 plus years of experience. I started as a software developer, then I moved into quality side of the software, and I have been working closely with the teams in big enterprises to create automation frameworks and testing the React and Angular based applications. And then recently I started exploring the AI side of it, like how AI and AI agents are affecting the softwares and how we can carefully test them and without leaking any bugs or anything to the production. So, yeah.
Thank you for the introduction, Tanvi. I've been doing this for a little bit, the podcast, but I've never had a chance, I think, if I'm not wrong, to talk to somebody who actually is in the space of quality control. It's generally been developers for the most part and people running companies. So I'm very excited to talk to it because, I have a bunch of things to ask you with everything that's been going on.
Mhm.
So super happy to have you on the podcast.
Same.
The some of the topics that we have here, we'll touch upon them as much as we can in the next
Mhm.
45 minutes to an hour, and also explore items outside of it. But just to quickly socialize what those topics are: prompt injection and security risks in LLM enabled applications,
Mhm.
the shift from traditional QA to AI behavior validation, and last but not least, how should engineering teams rethink quality, observability, and system validation in AI assisted software platforms? So there's quite a bit to talk about there. But to sort of kick this off, how has testing fundamentally changed? I'm presuming it has. So I'm just going to ask you how it has changed given all of the happenings in the space of AI. Now, this question, it's very broad, so I'm going to make it as narrow as possible, Tanvi, which is the things that you had done in the past or somebody who was doing it in the past when it comes to testing and automation and whatnot
Mhm.
to traditional software applications. I'm not necessarily talking about AI native applications. I'm talking about non AI native traditional software applications. How has testing changed given the tools that are available today?
So typically the ship to production has increased because now we have a lot of tools which we can leverage to code faster, and we have been more focusing on using AI to write the code. And then if we are a lot of code has been written by AI, then we need more protection towards the software. So but that has not been taken care so seriously how compared to the development part of it. And if we have a lot of code being developed in like 1 week of time, but we don't have that much capacity, or we don't consider that much capacity to be considered for testing that part of the code. So that's the biggest shift I'm seeing right now.
Okay, that's fair enough. So, to just rephrase what you just said, there is what took 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or more to build now takes minutes to
Yeah.
build, correct? So, the turnaround time has been dramatically quick. So, we're going to talk about that. But I want to sort of ask you a bunch of things and feel free to answer them if they make sense. If they don't, just dismiss it.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to ask is, I've been building software for a long time, and I've worked with a variety of testers, right? Testing teams, correct? But the nature of those teams has changed all the time. It depends on the company, it depends on the type of work that we do, depends on a number of other things. But for work that we do at Snowpal, our testers are developers, correct? We don't have a separation, Tanvi, necessarily between developers and testers. We don't have a separation between developers and project managers and
Yeah.
product managers and advertisers and testers. That's a different problem because you're a small company, you've got to wear multiple hats. But even otherwise, we had the developers write the unit test, write the functional test, which is common in a lot of places. So I've worked with testers who are coders who would write these automation scripts and whatnot. But I've also worked with testers who are not necessarily coders, who are folks who are doing testing using other tools, perhaps doing UI testing, maybe manually, or perhaps using other tools. That's my background or exposure to testers. Given that you are literally in that space, one of my first questions, Tanvi, is has the notion of a tester who's literally walking through the UI pages manually, is that gone? I mean, is that role still in place or is that role gone?
That is going super fast. So what you have said about that, you in your teams you just have everyone coding like testers and developers. We are also moving into that phase right now where we call it full stack development, right? Like the testers are developers and the developers are testers. So a lot of the places in the small teams that is already being there, but lot of the big enterprises that shift is happening right now where uh, developers are asked to write a lot of functional testing, and then the QE part or for us is to mostly do the end to end where a lot of systems are integrating. So the focus has been shifting towards that for sure.
So what does that mean? And I'm asking, a lot of these are genuine questions based on where the industry is going, because people ask me all the time, hey, do we need a developer anymore? And I ask this to other people because I ask people genuinely, like on the podcast, do you have a need for Krish as a developer anymore? Or can I use Lovable and other tools and just build software
Okay.
or have Claude generate all of the code? Now there's multiple answers to the question, but the crux of it is I don't think we need as many developers as we've needed in the past. Not even we only need a fraction of those to get the same number of things done. But if you had the capacity to retain the same number of developers, you can now get a lot more done,
Exactly.
right? 10 times
Yeah.
more, 20 times more.
Yeah.
So
So
do you see a future for testers, or is the role of tester is going to, like, 6 months from today, 12 months from today, do you expect to see an opening in any software company for a tester?
I see, in fact, a lot of openings for testers. You will not say testers, but they would be the intelligent system, like you would say a quality check on the systems, because now instead of the traditional testing, you would need some intelligence over how to intelligently checking the behavior and the output given by any AI agent or LLMs. So we definitely need a lot of quality checks around that, and I don't see that QA is going anywhere soon.
Okay, so let's talk about those types of quality checks, which means, what you're saying there is the need has changed, not going away, but the need has
Yeah,
seismically changed.
it has.
So, what are some changes that you're seeing there from a testing standpoint? Like, can you call out for some things that are happening completely differently? You could take the same example you started with, things are being built in much quicker time. Claude is generating a lot of that code, whether it's Claude or Lovable or Codex, does not matter. You get how does testing play into the software development life cycle, and how are you doing some of this testing of code that's actually not human written? Two separate questions. One is, how do you test code that's not written by humans, and then how is it changing from an SDLC standpoint?
So the first question, like, how do we test which is not written by humans? So um, we in our current system, if we have thousands of test cases, we would still run them again, any of the code generated by human or non-human. And then if it is not human, then definitely we need kind of so there are different aspects here, like what the non-human code is generated for. It is for any AI agent, or it is for software traditional softwares. So for traditional softwares, we need to do a quality check against the code generated, not and plus the behavior. But for AI agents, we need the behavioral testing. Like if I'm putting some prompts or if I'm giving some input on based on different inputs, how it is giving me those outputs, because the outputs will can be different, but the gist of the work done by that agent should be same.
Got it, right? So let's dig deeper into each of those. Let's talk about the easier one first, and let's then come to AI
Mhm.
agents. Traditional system, let's say you say tens of hundreds of use cases. You're saying you don't care whether Krish wrote the code or Claude generated the code. It was ultimately written,
Mhm.
and then you're going to run through the same test cases to make sure that it actually passes that.
Mhm.
Now, that part also, when you can automate the coding of that feature
Mhm.
or functionality, a lot of these tools also generate the tests, right? So why do I need, like, in other words, when people ask me how many developers you need,
Mhm.
I don't know what the right answer is, but I always say if you had 10 of them before and you're doing the exact same things, you probably need two people right now. You don't need the other eight, whether you like it or not. And we are seeing companies react to this because you see layoffs at AWS and Meta and
Yeah.
Oracle from last week, right, Tanvi? So if you talked about the first part of what you said there, if you had two testers or one tester in a sprint team that was part time, do you need one or do you need like one fourth of that one tester now?
Um, so to answer, when you said that code is able to generate the test cases itself, right? I have seen if it's generate 100 test cases, 30 of them might be not useful because it is trying to generate the test cases from a lot of context. It totally comes to the context now, like from where it got all the data and how it is trying to create the test cases. Those test cases may not be technically possible in the real production environment, and sometimes it misses the edge cases also. So the thing now is basically you are not spending time on writing the code yourself. You are spending time to enhance to go iterate through the code what is written by the AI and then updating that based where it is not correct. And then same
Okay.
goes for the test cases as well. So out of 70 test cases, then I have to go through what 70 test cases are actually needed for my testing. And that's like you definitely need human there to, I mean, I am not at the process where it's generate everything and I can blindly trust the output generated by AI. So if you say three QA, then I would say, yeah, we can have one and half, but we can't completely eliminate them right now. It might be possible in future when our AI agents are more robust and they have a lot of data from the training we are providing to different aspects. But yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about the AI agents. Let's say when companies are building these AI agents, for instance,
Mhm.
how do you approach the testing of those agents? You can take an example that you're familiar with,
Mhm.
or be creative and come up with one that's manufactured as well. But if you could speak to an AI agent, maybe tell us a little bit about what it does and how the testing actually works in the context of that agent.
So AI agents, if you heard of about SQL injection, there are prompt injections now. So there are a lot of prompt injection where uh, any prompt injection can break the security of the agent. So one of the aspect is to do the prompt injection validations, like your agent are uh, like completely not, they are not broken, so they are doing what they are meant for. So in AI agent you put system prompts which is not visible to the users, but you if you're creating an agent, you say this agent is supposed to do this particular task. And if I am asking, if it's a chatbot for financial system and it is supposed to give you interest rate or loan payment for calculation of that purpose, but if I'm a user and if I say, okay, this is my Python code and update this code for me and generate all these things for me, so my chatbot is not supposed to do that. But if it's giving me that, then it's unnecessary use of tokens which any other users can do. So all those kinds of testing and data validation and all those things needed to be done. And we have a lot of different matrices and we have a lot of different frameworks available in the market, which you can use to validate all these AI agents.
Okay. Now let's go with one of the things when you mentioned was, even if code is generated, what do I care as a tester? What I do actually care about is that it does what it's promising to do. But let me take an example.
Mhm.
When I talk to people on the podcast here and outside as well, in life outside the podcast, Tanvi, uh, people have built software without actually having developers in their teams,
Yeah.
which is incredible, something that could not have been done before. So they've not gone just up to prototyping, they've actually gone live in many cases. Now, you have to take that with a grain of salt. They probably might need a developer at some point. It just depends on how far you can delay the inevitable. But the number of those devs you want is also going to be a far fewer. Now, that being said, let's say someone's using, I don't know, Lovable, for instance, because a lot of them on the platform have told me that that's one that they actually do use.
Mhm.
Now, let's say it's a very specific question. I want to make it specific enough if you humor me for a second here. I, as a non-developer or as a developer, does not matter. I go to Lovable. I, prompt my way into building an application. Something not too complex, but it's a few pages. It does X, Y, and Z. Now it generates the code, right? And then I run it through these environments, maybe lower environments before it goes all the way to through staging or production. Now, when I push it to a development environment where, or the integration environment where QA is going to come into play, you're going to go with your test cases and see, hey, does Krish or what Krish built, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? But here is the specificity. Here is a specific question I have. And hopefully I articulate this question well enough that it makes sense. When you run through your test cases and test the functionality of what it did, you are sure your intent is to test whether the app is doing what it's promising to do or what it's supposed to do, but you're actually testing what was generated by Lovable, which is a third party platform, or Codex, doesn't matter what the platforms are, the tools are used. They have their own testers. Those large companies have their own testers to test if their products do the job that it's supposed to do for their end users. And I happen to be an end user of that product. I used the product and it generated some code. By you testing that, while your intent is actually to test the functionality of what I built, what you don't want to do or waste cycles is in testing what Lovable should be doing, because there's a different team that's doing the testing. Now, you see what I mean here, right? How do you separate? There's two ways to argue. You could say, Krish, I could care less how you generated this code.
Mm-hmm.
You could have used Lovable, you could have used Codex, you could have used Claude. So I'm going to wear this singular hat and say, you know what, does Krish's app do what it's supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fair argument. But if you take a company from a company standpoint, that's not the most sensible argument, because you don't want to test what Lovable is known to do well. You only want to test what Lovable is not necessarily known to do well.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, does this question make sense as to what I'm trying to ask here?
Um, this question makes sense. I mean, it comes to the point, what is the requirement? So if the requirement is to test Lovable, then
No, it's not, right? You see, the requirement is not a test Lovable, but at the same time, the requirement is to test the app that I built,
mhm,
but you want to spend the least amount of time testing what could possibly be broken, as opposed to testing what the platform that I used. Because you know what I mean? We're two different teams in the company, but we're not two different companies. So we work together. So you're going to ask me, Krish, what did you use to generate this code? I'm not going to keep it a secret. I'm going to tell you it's Lovable.
mhm.
So as a tester, do you need to understand where Lovable's strengths and weaknesses are? So you only focus on the weaknesses on testing this?
Yeah, I will not focus on the weaknesses of Lovable, because according to me, what it is generating as an end result by you is what you have fed in the plan, how you have given the instructions, what architecture you gave, what all the use cases you have asked to develop it. And I would only be interested in testing the end product, what it created based on the requirement was given. Because uh, so at enterprise level, if I have Lovable, then I'm pretty sure it has been validated enough so that we have that to use at that scale.
See, that's a fair point, right? Which is what I said. There's two ways to look at it. But to play the devil's advocate, Tanvi, is that the best use of time? Because if you ignored the tool that I used to generate the code, then are you actually doing more testing than necessary? Because for argument's sakes, it makes sense to say, I don't care which tool you use.
Hmm.
But if you take a startup where you have a few people, or a smaller organization, or as fewer humans are in the mix of things to build software, we are all trying to do as much as we can using all of the tools available.
Hmm.
So my question is, if you play the devil's advocate, would you take a different view, or would you still stick to the view which is, hey, I don't really care how you generate it. I will still test it the way I have been testing it in the past.
Um, I would still not care about how the code is generated, because I mean, if it is, I will not take I would not take any. So yeah, my thought process would be on the reputation also. So if you say Lovable, Cursor, Cloud, what I have been hearing and using and reusing all different tools, my preference would be if it is generated by cloud, it's more trustworthy for me personally. If I'm saying, for example, if it's generated by Lovable and Cursor, then Cursor goes first and then Lovable, because all these different platforms are built for some different purpose. So that would come into my thought process. And then my actual focus would be, if I'm in startup or anywhere, like if my end product, which is going to be used by different users, that has to be foolproof, rather than wasting my time on testing what generated it.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you talk about roles in a company, right now roles are changing quickly, very, very quickly.
Mhm.
You know, I've talked to people who told me that they had 50 developers in the team.
Yeah.
They're down to 8 developers,
Yeah.
right? They've actually gone 20%,
Mhm.
which means this is impacting everybody, right? So do you still see, back to what I was asking earlier, the role of a tester independently for testing, or do you think they're going to have to become developers and testers and probably do something else as well? But they cannot apply for a job saying, hey, you know what, there is a QA position open or lead QA, because I don't know, but I would be surprised, because even when we would hire somebody into the team as a developer today, Tanvi, we don't want to look for necessarily somebody who's just a raw developer.
Yeah.
We want that person to be able to do three other things that's outside of development, because things have changed. So how are you seeing that pan out from an industry standpoint?
Definitely what you said is correct. Like, everyone has to wear different hats based on the requirement within the team or everywhere. A single skill is not working anymore. And if I'm a developer, I'm supposed to do the QE work also. And if I'm QE, I'm supposed to do and kind of a DevOps work where the QA can fit better if they are non-technical or non-developers. DevOps, so yeah, so the QE is more moving into the DevOps, like they can deploy the codes, or they can triage the bugs, and if anything coming in production, they should be the first person to find the root cause and figure out what is changing, what caused that issue. So all these things are happening right now, and it has to be both the ways. Like, people has to be full stack, what I can say right now.
Okay, and what about, let's say, going to the software development life cycle? So, I've been building software for a long time, but the way we've done it has always changed. We've never, you can't afford to be stagnant in this industry, and certainly not if you're working in a small company. That's not to say that you can be stagnant in large organizations. I'm just saying, having worked in both, it's my personal opinion that the smaller the company, the more hats you're having to wear, just because you don't have all the money and the time.
Yeah.
And things change, but things have changed a lot more in the last couple of years. So, how, given that I can, when somebody gives me a requirement, what would have taken me 2 weeks to do
Hmm.
probably takes me a day to do today,
Yeah.
correct? Which means the sprint cannot be 2 weeks long. I always thought, I'm not a big sprint proponent. I thought the sprint processes in general, the ceremonies of sprint took up more time than the actual work. So at Snowpal, we never had a traditional sprint methodology.
Hmm.
But to companies that do, say they had a 2 week sprint, do we still have a 2 week sprint? And how does QA come into play? Because if I can generate code and I give what the product manager wants by the end of the day, and if we need to ship this to production, say by end of day tomorrow, when does QA come into play? Do you come into play on day one, session one, which is the first half of the day one, session two, or day two, session one? Where does Tanvi and Tanvi's team come into play for shipping this feature?
So in big enterprises, we still have, as of now, we still have 2 week sprints. And the QA comes into the picture on day one, where we are meeting with the developers, going through the different test cases which they need to work based on finding the impact, where what code changes are being done, what are they trying to implement, and kind of figure out the baseline for testing. Then we meet again on day three, where we talk about and review what the code is, where if a particular code is implementing the backend system, also the systems which are not directly related to us, but because in banking you have tens of systems interacting with each other. Necessarily you are just making a line of code. If that particular flag is changed, that file is not being sent to the FBA or something, and it it's done, right? So we are kind of trying to analyze those impacts on day three and write down the test cases or list down the test cases, and then we work on automating those. And then the developers do kind of 80% of test automation and testing, and then it comes to us where we have to do the integration and the end-to-end testing, where we are meeting all different teams, the back office team, the FBA team, or CTR team, or all those things, where if this particular change is being processed in the systems smoothly. So those kind of things come into picture for us.
Okay, so you said that sprint is still 2 weeks. How much more is getting done from a feature shipping standpoint? Let's say you shipped the dev team,
Mhm.
assuming the same size and velocity and whatnot. Let's say they ship 10 features before using these code generation tools. Are they shipping 15 features today, 20 features, 50 features, or 100 features?
I don't have that exact number, but definitely the velocity has increased. And we have been able to do the delivery of the features at much faster rate. We are still in the process of utilizing AI kind of 80%, not 100%. Uh, but yeah, so that's where we are right now.
Okay, so what are some things that, okay, let me ask you, what are some tools that you use today for whatever it is that you're doing, like, for on a day-to-day basis? What are some tools that you use that you actually like to use that have increased your productivity many folds?
Um, so at the enterprise level, we have Copilot, which we use tremendously. And but personally, I
Is it the GitHub Copilot or the Microsoft's Copilot outside of
Microsoft.
GitHub?
Microsoft.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have internal tools. We have created a lot of different Visual Studio Code extensions where we have created our own AI agents, and we are kind of interacting with different contents and the context, trying to feed the context in those agents and create uh, the use cases and the requirement and all those things. What we are doing that part as well. But outside the organization, I have been using Cursor, Cloud, and a lot of the different AI tools, and that has been like tremendously pretty good at that level.
So let's talk about shipping software quicker. On one side, I hear that, a lot more software can be built in quicker time, which is true, right?
Mhm.
Which is true, undeniable. But as an end user, now I'm not talking about this as somebody who's running a company, Tanvi, I'm talking about this as an end user who's using other products and platforms. I'm not changing I mean, I use Bank of America for banking, right? In the last 3 years, I cannot think of one new feature I've seen from an end user consumption standpoint.
Mhm.
I use Fidelity for some of what I do for trading and investments. I cannot think of a single change. I use E-Trade. I cannot think of a single change. Now the argument could be they've made dramatic changes, but
Mhm.
all dramatic changes on the server side, right? On the backend systems, meaning it's transparent to the end user, right? That I'm not aware of those changes.
Mhm.
I was talking about, the number of features that end up showing up in these systems. And I was giving an example of some of the platforms I use.
Mhm.
Bank of America. I'm not picking on these, but that's what I use. And I'm yet to see this new feature. So there's two ways to look at this. One is maybe they're making dramatic changes and improvements, but perhaps to their back-end systems. So maybe it's transparent to the end user. But part of me thinks otherwise, Tanvi, and here is why. I've actually, before I launched our own company, Snowpal, my company,
Mhm.
I've worked for a lot of companies over in my career, large ones and small ones. And I know, as somebody who's led these teams, small and fairly large teams, you never spend many sprints not making any improvements that the end user actually sees. If you're ever in the B2C business,
Mhm.
a company that does both B2B and B2C, the product team usually comes to you and says, Krish, we need to make some changes, but you can't use all of your sprint cycles to do things that are beautiful in the back end. I want to be able to go to the customer and say, we've made X, Y, and Z changes. Maybe the color changing, maybe the buttons getting bigger as a silly example, but there should be some conspicuous visual changes because I don't want to pick on Microsoft, but it's somebody who does not use Microsoft products. I'll tell you, Tanvi, a lot of times we see a new operating system with maybe two changes, but they completely change the skin, and everyone thinks it's a brand. There's a number of changes that come to the table, right?
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to ask is it what do you think is happening? Is it that all the money is being spent on improving backend systems, which is why these apps could probably look stagnant to the end user? Or is there a gap between what we are hearing and reading in terms of how fast you can generate code, how fast we can ship code, and large companies possibly not actually doing that when it comes to the end game.
I can say from experience, like what I have been hearing on LinkedIn and all different social medias, and when I hear something different in more private groups like Reddit and everywhere, fintech is a sector where AI is not able to show a lot of impact because we have a lot of constraints for P2. We have, and I think finance and fintech is a sector where we are most concerned on the trustfulness of the AI because the customers is impacted, right? That their data is impacted. When you say the lot of things are beautifications are happening behind the scenes and you don't see, so I can give you some examples. There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes. For example, modernization of APIs, which you will the end customer will never see. We are using AI to automate lot of stuffs which were not there before within the organization and within the teams, which may not impact the end customer directly, but it impacts the how the velocity and the speed how they are done. For example, we could automate the deployment process. It is which used to take like 4 or 5 hours. Now it is like two button click. So all these things are happening behind the scenes, which were not possible before AI because it was kind of more of R&D. But now we have resources and we are able to do that. And when you say the end
But
customer,
Tanvi, sorry to interrupt you there, but let's say you talk deployment, right? Good point there. You're able to do more deployments and do deployments quicker, but that only makes sense if it's directly proportional to what it is that you're building. If I'm continuing to build only 10 features, what is the point in improving the speed of deployment?
okay,
It has to be proportional to what I'm building.
yeah, I was coming to that point. So if I say about banking and if I say about Taylor platform, right? So Taylor platform is not just 4, 5, 10 pages. It's not a website. Right. So there are a lot of enhancement happening which are visible to the teller and lot of improvements in the speed and it's not that there are just the cosmetic changes which user is able to see, but there are different changes where if there is a new account, then there should be some hold for that account on that number of amount. So all those things and different use cases are being uh, improved and delivered on daily basis. This is just one segment I'm talking about.
Okay, so when you said teller, are you talking about the folks who are at the bank
Yeah.
who give you cash and stuff? Okay, so you're saying there are things that probably are transparent to you, but they are probably and hopefully improving. But you also mentioned that when you go to these social media platforms, they speak of fintech. There are some industries that are, let's talk about regulated
Yeah.
industries, right? Some are highly regulated, some are regulated to some extent, but there's a lot of those industries. I can think of banking is one,
Healthcare,
insurance is
insurance.
another, medicine and pharmaceutical industries are probably also there.
Yeah.
So a lot of these industries, some are highly governed and regulated, and some not so much. So you talked about AI agents. Let's talk about governance of these AI agents. Now, if you wrote code that was not great, and if it did something it's not supposed to do, well, there could be a breach, there could be an issue. You see it in the news, you react to it, and hopefully at some point the team does fix it. The problem with AI agents going quote unquote rogue is that it may or may not get detected till a lot of damage actually gets got done. So, what are some of the things that you're seeing coming into play by way of governance, and also maybe if there's tools that you're using in particular to ensure that these AI agents are actually only doing what they are promising to do, but they also have the checks and balances in place? How does that
So
essentially
one of
work?
the major governance what I'm looking at right now, and a lot of people are following, and I even created an open source tool as well, which is Log Miner. So now more of the focus is going towards the log monitoring and checking the observation and observability of the production logs, like how, what, and how the application is behaving, and if we can get the alerts or if we can monitor the behavior before something big happens. So
Okay, so sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, so before the customer points it, there are a lot of checks and monitoring happens where you can figure out and you can change before it goes out of your control. And that is going to be there more and more we use AI agents.
So you mentioned logs and observability. That's a good topic to talk a little bit about. What, are there some favorite tools that you have? Like, what is your favorite observability platform?
Um, so what I have worked on is Datadog. The Datadog gives you a lot of options where you can customize it and you can have different dashboards, views, errors, and all those things. So it's one of them which I have used. And the I can talk about the open source tool I have worked and.
No, actually, Dave, you picked the right one because that's one of my favorite tools.
Mhm.
I like Datadog as the products and the company in general, right? So yeah, so go ahead if you want to share some specific examples of how you folks use Datadog. That'll be helpful as well. But feel free to speak about other tools as well.
So I mean, I can't share much about because this is inside the.
No, not here. I'm talking about in general, from what you're seeing in observability.
Yeah.
Like, are there some features within Datadog that you kind of have taken a liking to?
So yeah, you can set the alerts. So if any, so we have kind of, and we have a separate team who does that for us. So they are constantly monitoring different kinds of errors, different kinds of, if any simple alert comes for few minutes, they will just alert us and they'll say, okay, this is happening. Can you go and check why this is happening? And then we are quick enough to figure out. And then if any fix is needed, we do that. So that's how we are using it. And then we have like monitoring dashboard where we are just constantly monitoring for errors and alerts. We are um yeah, so yeah, that's what pretty much.
That's good. Let's talk a little bit more there, right? See, I like Datadog, and here is how I've seen these tools being used. You typically build software. You have to do a few things as a developer to make sure you're logging it
Yeah,
the way
yeah, so
you have your Datadog is able to.
that comes to the point where we the developers have been asked to log more information, not the P2 data, but the information which can be easily traceable to figure out when something happens.
Exactly, right? That's it becomes an art because the way you formatted the structure of those messages, all of that you have to do it a certain way so you can go
Yeah.
if there is an issue in production, you can get to it sooner.
Mhm.
But the thing I want to ask you is I've never seen a testing team engage early enough in checking the quality of what is being logged. What I have seen happen more often than not is us as a dev team go do what we're supposed to do, whether it's Dynatrace or Raydog or New Relic, doesn't matter.
Mhm.
We do what needs to be done. The testing team is actually able to test the quality of what we produced and see if it conforms with the specification. We deploy it, push it through the environments, it goes all the way to production, and then it starts generating these logs. And then when things go haywire, you start firefighting there. I wonder, I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense. Shouldn't this that also be part of the testing process as to how you're logging, what you're logging, so the testing team is able to actually test the quality of what is being written to the logs? You sometimes, as a developer, we write one too many things. I mean, that's costly. For one, Datadog is going to charge you more money, and two, I have to wade through all the noise to get to what I want.
Yeah.
So, have you seen testing team have inputs into the quality of what is being written into these logs, or are you just seeing it the way I'm presenting it here?
Um, so we have a separate team where we get the reports of the logging has been done too much, or we have found these things in the logs which should not be there. So this is happening, but not by the QA team. But the shift is happening, and the QA teams are now asked to, like you said, you have to wear all different hats, right? So the QA team are now asked to be the first point of contact. If anything happens, you need to go and find out why that happened and why, how you could fix it before. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then talking about the team composition, right? This is something that's very interesting too because people ask me what the composition of a team looks like today.
Hmm.
I think it's an important question
Hmm.
because if I went 3 years ago, if you had a dev team, just a random structure of a hypothetical dev team, let's say you have three developers. You may have we've had like one part-time tester, meaning they are working with multiple
Yeah.
teams, one part-time project manager because they're managing multiple teams. The only dedicated people really in this team are the developers, the three of them. Everybody else is playing a part-time role essentially for the most part, and the DevOps engineers and the DevSecOps engineers are shared across multiple teams. But the traditional structure, you still had a product manager, a project manager, a tester, a developer, an architect, a DevOps engineer. The amount of time they spent doing each of these activities did change significantly, but you had all of these people. If you ask me to structure a team at Snowpal today, Tanvi, it would look nothing like how I would have done it like 3 years ago. But that's just me.
Mhm.
How are you actually seeing, reading, or hearing, or watching the composition of dev software engineering teams change? Is it intact, meaning it's exactly as it was 3 years ago, or is it 180 degrees different, or is it somewhere a little bit different but not all the way there?
So the difference would is visible in different levels of organization. If it's a startup, if it's a small team, then there is no project manager, there is no product owner, there is one person who is taking care of different features and sitting with the developer, creating it one day, and it's done. And they are the project product owner or project manager or whoever is that person who is working on defining the use cases and the requirements is testing it with the developer itself. But in big organizations, I can still say that that has not drastically changed. We have reduced the number, we could reduce the number of people, but there are still people who are managing those stuffs. The product one product owner is taking care of three products instead of one. Project managers are taking care of more teams than one, but they it's still there.
Okay. And and when people ask, I cannot tell you the number of times people have come and asked me or asked me on the podcast outside, fair question, which is, Krish, what happens to developers?
Hmm.
AI is coming after all jobs, white collar jobs, as we all know. And there was a diagram that I saw. Someone put it out, and it was a beautiful diagram as to the impact of AI on certain positions and jobs.
That
Sorry,
diagram was by Cloud, right?
I don't know if it's by Claude or I could
Yeah, it
be,
was by
but it basically said that the software developers
Mhm.
were literally at the top of that list, literally at the
Yeah,
top. So naturally, people ask me this question: what happens to software developers? And here's my general answer, which is it's undeniable that you need a different skill set to stay employed today. It's undeniable that you need far fewer developers to get the same number of things done than it was in the past. But along in the same breath, it's my opinion, Tanvi, that while it's not difficult to replace a software developer in a software engineering team, it's my opinion that it's probably easier to replace a lot of the other roles in that very team. In other words, as a developer, we needed a lot of these other people to help us build software. Now, actually, we are able to not need all of the other people to help us build software as developers, right? So the impact is both ways. Companies need fewer developers, and developers need fewer other roles to get the same stuff done.
true.
Now, given that as context, and also to add something I read the other day where Stanford, if I'm not wrong, had 300 graduates or something along those lines in a certain department. And I think 25 of them got a full time job. The other 80% of them or 75% of them are doing AI unpaid internships, as I read in other companies. We're talking an Ivy League school
Hmm.
called Stanford. What does it mean to be looking for work as a fresh graduate today? I mean, it's true for everybody, but I'm just curious. People are spending a lot of time and money going to college, and especially if you're in the US, you're spending way too much money going to college. And having spent 7.5 years in college, I wish I could get back every single one of those days so I don't have to be in college at all. But time has passed, you can roll back what you've done. If you were graduating from high school yesterday, are you going to actually go to college?
I joke with my husband every day that instead of software field, now we have to be look for jobs like handyman, painter, and all these stuffs. Where
Vocational jobs, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so where it's for at least next 5-10 years until we have robots doing everything, we are still safe. So yeah, so I think you still need. So I would say like that, like to use AI, you definitely need.
No, sorry, to go back to my question, if you graduated yesterday from high school,
Mhm.
will you be applying to go to college or would you just not go to college?
I would go to college to learn something else than software development.
Like what? What would you learn?
um some vocational, so for example, makeup artist, or in interior designer, like where.
So let me hang on. So typically it costs, I don't know how much, like $100,000. If you're going out of state, a lot more money.
Mhm.
So are you going to be like borrowing $100,000 to go learn interior design in 2026 if you have to go to college?
No.
So,
Yeah.
which comes brings to my core of my question is this: you know, for many years and decades, we've all been oriented in a certain way,
Oh yeah.
and it's also cultural, right? It's very cultural. Some parts of the world, people associate a lot more value to college degrees than other parts of the world. The two of us happen to come from one part of the world where the college degree, having one, is the least everyone has to do because I mean everybody does it and it's not particularly difficult, so you would do it too. I mean, I don't know how many people I know, even including myself, who went to college because of the need to learn something
Need to go.
or the inner urge to learn and educate ourselves. No, I went to college because my dad said, sure, you graduate from high school, go to college. As simple as that, right? So, is there is that a moment of reckoning, or are we going to still stick to the same cultural or societal paradigms where we're going to send the next generations to college?
It's a difficult question, but I think it's early to say what I'm going to do with my kids, but definitely I'm not going to. So these days, what talk I have with my friends and everyone who has kids young. So my kids are young, they are like 9 years old. So we definitely talk about, do we really need to pressurize them to learn math, and like how we used to pressure, our parents used to pressurize us, like you have to do the studies, you have to do this, you have to learn this, you have to be good at math, you have to be good at writing and all those stuffs, right? So that has changed for me right now. Like I am not that person anymore where I know that AI can do a lot of different stuffs, which is not like that's not suitable for my son when he grows up. So that perspective has changed. But about college, I'm not yet convinced that I would not send him college yet. I
Okay,
might
I mean
change
that's
that in next 10 years, but that's like from the culture I come from, right? So I it will take some time, but if I see the generations, like for example, the kids ahead of him, they are doing better without going college and they are pursuing some good career and all those things, that might change for me as well. That's the
I mean
honest.
that's fair enough, right? I'll tell you, in a social circle,
Yeah.
right? Let's say not in a professional circle, in a
Yeah.
social circle, when I meet other people who I happen to come from, say, my part of the world, I don't know of a single parent that I've had a conversation with and I've asked this question offline.
Hmm.
Almost everyone tells me, nope, I wouldn't go to college. But at the same time, I don't know of a single family where the child actually did not go to college, right? So the culture, what they're telling me is quite different from what they're doing, right? So there's a complete disconnect. So,
Yeah.
uh, take it for what it's worth, right? So things are not necessarily changing at that pace. So let's say somebody goes to college today. A lot of people have to borrow money. Not everyone has the money to pay for college. In fact, most people borrow money, and it's a ton of money that people do borrow. And then you graduate 4 years down the road, 2030. Just to think about it.
Yeah.
If I enroll in college today, I'm going to graduate in 2030, and I'm going to have a diploma with me and no real skills. I mean, sure, you can learn, pick up some along the way, but you're working for grades, not so much. So I mean, we talked about college grads, but that's true for everybody, right? People who've done this for 10 years, 15, I've been building software for like 25 years. What does it mean to people to, how do they stay employed? I mean, you said you have to pick up a different art or a different craft. That's sometimes easier said than done. There's plenty of people doing HVAC and whatnot, and they're really good at what they do. So to pick up something is not necessarily easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the last thing I want to I'm trying to lead you to an answer, but take it for what it's worth. More people are telling me that they want to start a business. They want to become entrepreneurs. People who always feared getting into doing that because they had a job, they were sailing on this boat, it was paying them, you get 2 paychecks a month, have a decent car, you're driving a Tesla, you have no good reason to do a business. But do you see that happening? Meaning people are either getting laid off or they're not finding work. It takes several months to find employment. In your experience, Tanvi, are you seeing more people start businesses or are you still seeing them look for that work, look for that steady employment and paycheck?
I would say um, people are still looking for a job because if you know, business is not giving you easy money. It
Not at
is,
all. I can tell you, as somebody who's been running it, it's
yeah.
the most difficult way
I
to make
I
money.
also have experience. So so no one is willing to leave the job until you are established in that business. That's the reality. So anyone who has a backup is, or who is really kind of a person who is kind of on like, I am determined to do that without, in any case whatever happens, who is very kind of um, fearless, are leaving the job and doing the business. Otherwise, I have not seen people who are willingly leaving the job and doing starting a business without having the establishment of it, or it is generating some revenue for you. So if anyone is getting laid off and if they had no plans initially to start the business, they will definitely look for the job. And if that's not happening, then the second choice is the business.
So, just to summarize that part, right?
Mhm.
It's two important points. You know, while a lot of us acknowledge that college education is not necessarily needed unless you're going to be a doctor because you need that formal education, or you're doing law because you need to pass the bar, you need the certification and whatnot. For engineering, you certainly don't need a diploma, but what we have established in the last 10 minutes, Tanvi, is even though it's not needed, people have not been able to make that mental shift, so they're continuing to do what they've done in the past, right? So nothing's changed there. When it comes to entrepreneurship, you've established that as well, which is while people might want to do it, they look to be safe and secure. But when you have a plan B, you'll never become an entrepreneur. I can speak to it because when you do it part time, it's going to be part time till you actually die. That's the way it works. So unless you quit and do it, it more often than not, it doesn't work. Which means people have not necessarily made that shift either. So on one side, you have AI forcing you to make some decisions, but it seems to me that humans are not reacting to it as quickly as they might have to, right? That's just human nature. Nobody likes change. You're only going to do it unless people start seeing that pink slip. They never think about what I should do next because you keep wondering, you know what, maybe this won't happen to me, right? Maybe it will not. So there is a disconnect. I don't mean to sound philosophical. You have a world with 8 billion people. It's going to go to like 10 billion by the turn of the century or even much sooner than that. And you have certain pockets of the world where there's a lot more people in that demographic. I will speak to it as one of the last things I want to ask you about, right? Your thoughts. I know it's not QA related, but I think we've spoken a fair bit about QA, so I think it's
Yeah,
worth
yeah, yeah.
having this chat. So, I think about 70% of the population in India, if I'm not wrong, is under 30 years of age. That's an incredible number, especially when you know the base number is 1.4 billion people. So I saw a video the other day where somebody is going to look for work. I was petrified. I was like, oh my goodness. They had like 25 or 30 openings. There were like 10,000 people looking for work. And the saddest part is not that 10,000 people were looking for work when there were only 25 openings. The scary part was each of those 10,000 people was more than qualified in doing that job. That's what scared the heck out of me, right? So you're not, and this converts to software engineering hiring as well. When you place an ad, when you have 100 people apply, it's very hard because you have to look for credibility. That doesn't come easy. That's very difficult. And sometimes you need the skills that you need to live life today. So the thing I want to ask you by summarizing that, Tanvi, is how would you hire somebody differently than how you would have hired them 3 years ago? Let's say Krish is applying for a job in Tanvi's team. What are some skills that you're looking for in me today that you would have actually not bothered to look for 2 3 years ago?
If I'm looking, I'm not talking about if I belong to any organization or anything. For me, I'm for like anytime if I give the interview or if I'm looking for a person, I think I would look for one thing, how good he is at prompt engineering.
Okay.
and um, and definitely the attitude and the behavioral thing, like how are you committed and dedicated to work, because I have seen um, there is a shift in how people are perceiving for the work and the dedication. So those would be the things I would say.
Fair enough. I know we are. I have one last question to ask you, but I've thrown a bunch at you. It's always easier to ask the questions sometimes. Here is your opportunity. You can ask me anything you want to ask me.
So I'll ask the same question. I'll ask one or two more questions. Like the first one is, how would you hire anyone? Like what you see now for people to work for you? What qualities do you look for? And how do you see this changing paradigm of AI? Like how the things are shifting at your end, or how things are shifting when you talk to different people? Like what's the norm right now? Because I think there's a lot of talk, but the reality is not align is in alignment with whatever is being taught.
I think it's a good question. There's two questions, right? So I'll answer the second one first. Um, I agree that there is misalignment between what you're reading, at least not a number of times from what's happening, but that misalignment is also specific to the industry and the size of the organization, which is always true. Things move much slower in larger organizations than in smaller companies. I will speak to it from a smaller company standpoint because that's where the crux
Mhm.
of my recent experience of the last 10, 15 years has been. So, software development should not be done like it was done 2, 3 years ago. That's a given. Like if you ask, like we are one of the things we do, Tanvi, is build APIs so other companies can build software in quick time. We have 8 APIs on AWS Marketplace. Building the ninth one, given that we are a well-oiled machine, would
Mhm.
have taken us a lot lesser time if we did it in a more traditional manner. By traditional, I mean the way we would have done it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But we don't want to do that. Everything we do today
Mhm.
should be a reflection of how things are changing. It's not just the end product. The end product is an API. Sure, that's going to be different. But the approach that we take to building that software has to be dramatically different. But what does that mean? You know, one of Einstein's quotes. Hopefully, it's the correct. Internet attributes quotes to the wrong person, but this one is probably Einstein's quotes. Is you cannot do the same actions repeatedly and expect different results, right? But people do all the time. If I want things to be surely and clearly different, I have to make an honest attempt, a conscious attempt at doing things differently.
Mhm.
But what are some things I have to do differently? Is it just generating code? No, because that's something you got to do, but that's not it. But even when you're generating code, what are some of the tools you got to use to generate code? That's not an easy decision because each tool works for,
Different.
it's specific to the company and the person. So you've got to make a decision. You can't go with 10 different tools, then it's going to be a proliferation of tools. Who's going to be using those tools? Am I looking for a Python programmer or a Golang programmer? Not anymore, because we have multiple languages in our ecosystem. We've never respected, we love languages, but we never hired people based on their skill sets in a particular language. But that's very different from how a lot of the large companies do.
Yeah.
They ask you whether you're a Java programmer or a Golang programmer or a Ruby programmer or whatever, right? That's not how we did it. Because everybody can generate code these days, with all of the tools, and you can generate code in the language that you want to generate code in. So who cares?
Yeah.
And also the code that you write, we were taught to write good code, clean code, scalable code. I don't have to do that anymore because I can write crappy code, excuse my language, and have the tool clean up Krish's bad code and have it generate good code. So why should I write good code? So the skills I need to have right now to build software is dramatically different, which means the way we go to hiring has to also be different. But when hiring has to be different, the person who comes to the table to be hired has to have learned that differently, which means your academic institutions should be different as well. So the point I'm trying to make here is if you see anything that you're doing that you would have done it the same way 2 years ago, that's a red flag. That's our red flag, right? If I go to do something and if I feel like, Krish, I'm doing it the same way I would have done it in 2024, that's a clear indicator to me, Tanvi, that I should be doing it differently, right? So that's a fundamental difference. Um, your closing comment before we end the podcast, Tanvi?
No, it's we are in a world where every day we have to learn new stuffs to be accommodating with the technologies shifting. That's it. We are learner every day.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much for your time. And folks, until next time, bye bye.